Well, welcome back. What I'm going to talk about today is just my favorite setup for jigging streamers with a modified European nymphing approach. To kind of get started, what we're going to do is talk about the type of line. There's definitely a time and place for monofilament. I talked about this the other week, but when I'm working streamers, when I'm retrieving with my line hand or when I'm stripping with my line hand, what I'm looking for is something I can grab onto and just gives me a better feel. And this is where a European nymphing line with a fly line finish just gives me the confidence and gives me the ability to kind of hold on and grab onto that line, because a lot of times you're often stripping in the line with the hook set, and often with that monofilament my hands just slip and I often miss a lot of strikes just because I'm not able to fully grab onto that line. So this is just an SA 22 thousandths level competition line, and then off of that, using a blood knot, I'm just going to run about 5 feet of 15-pound test maxima. And on this connection, I just have a little bit of UV resin just to kind of clean up that bump, to smooth out that transition from the line to the leader. Just in the event if I strip that connection through the guides, it's going to go smoothly rather than kind of hang up on the bump. So I got about 5 feet of 15-pound test maxima. Then off of that, I have a short section of cider. This is just going to be an OX cider. And I'm just using an SA tricolor material in the OX diameters. And this is going to be about 20 inches. And then off my 20 inches, I'm going to run a level section of tippet. And I'm just using a single blood knot, a standard blood knot for that. And that tippet is going to be anywhere from like 4 to 5 feet for the waters I'm fishing. The waters I'm currently fishing here are maybe about maybe 2 or 3 feet on average, sometimes a little bit deeper. But that 4 to 5 foot mark always allows me to keep that cider off the water, and I can jig and see that cider during the presentation. The water types that you fish are going to dictate how long this tippet is. I mean, recently I was on the South Holston, maybe a month or so ago, and my tippet length was on average somewhere between 7 and 8 feet during generation, just because of the depth change. So because of that, let the conditions and the waters you fish dictate the length of the tippet. With this approach, normally I'm using anywhere from like a 2X down to a 4X. Recently we have had some water's a little turbid, off color. I've been throwing some bigger streamers, and as a result I've been just throwing 2X off of that. But sometimes in lower, clearer water, I will be jigging as small as a 4X diameter tippet. Another thing I want to mention with this jigging approach is don't just always think about it as a jigging approach with a high rod tip. There's a lot of times when you're fishing waters where you're casting to the bank, the water's really shallow. And if you're casting a heavily weighted jig in shallow water, it's going to hang up immediately. And then also, usually fish that are in the shallow waters, they're often in the mode of hunting. So on average, they're going to chase more likely than not. So a lot of times what I'll do is, if I'm going to cast right to the bank, I'll keep the rod tip down like a traditional streamer approach with a floating line or a sink tip or a full sinking line, where I'm going to cast across to the shallow water, start keeping the rod tip down low, start stripping immediately. And I have that European nymphing line, something I can grab onto and quickly retrieve. And as soon as I go into the drop off, that's where I'm going to hold the rod tip high, keep more line leader off the water, and go into more of my traditional tight line approach. Another thing I want to mention here is when you're working streamers, you got to think about streamer fishing in the exact same way you think about nymph fishing. My mentor, Mr. Humphreys, always talked about the difference between a good nymph fisher and an okay nymph fisher is one split shot. And I believe the same is very true when you're talking about streamer fishing, is when fish are not on the shallows or in the shallows, but they're hunkered down, maybe in their resting spots or in the slower, deeper pools. If you're just putting a fly 4 or 5 feet above their head and you start making the cast and start stripping the fly immediately 4 or 5 feet above their head, and if they're not in the chasing mode or if they're not hungry, they're not going to chase it. So one of the things you need to do is you need to bring the fight to the fish. And the idea is, just like even the most timid person, even someone like myself, it's been since 6th grade since I've been in any sort of fight. But if someone's talking smack to me across the street, or if someone's going on the internet talking, that doesn't really get me wound up whatsoever. But if someone comes up to you and actually starts poking you, or in one of the movies they say call poking the bear, and you get that really close interaction, that's going to invoke some sort of reaction on your part, or in this case, the fish's part. So what I mean is, if you're just casting and you just start stripping the flies immediately in deeper water, chances are you're not going to invoke that trigger, that response that you're looking to get from a fish. So just remember that when you are working jigs in deeper water, once you make that cast, stop the rod tip high. You can even do a tuck cast and just watch that fly drop, or in this case, even many situations, watch that sighter drop to the level you want it to go. But give that fly, or this streamer in this case, time to get down to the bottom before you begin moving the streamer. So another thing that my friend Russ Madden from Michigan talks about, he just calls it fishing the contours, and it's the same principle. Just don't cast and start stripping or start jigging. Cast, let the fly drop to the level that you want it to go to, and then you can begin moving. And that's the other advantage of this cider material, is that just knowing that my tippet length is 4 feet from my cider, all I need to do is just kind of understand the angle and the height of my cider off of the water. So if I'm fishing deeper water and I want my fly 4 feet down, I'll basically wait until my cider is vertical and basically right on the surface edge. And when I see that, I know my jig is approximately 4 feet down. If I'm not getting down to where I need to, and I need to go down a little bit deeper, or if I'm not occasionally coming in contact with the bottom, then I may even drop this cider. And that's why I use multiple colors. In this case, the orange is shown right now, white, and then followed by the yellow. So in a lot of situations, if I'm not hooking bottom on occasion, or if I'm not catching fish, I'm just going to drop this to another color change, and then I'm going to start working that level. So just be patient, work the levels, but make sure you just don't cast and strip. Get the fly to that strike zone and then begin your presentation. Lastly, I want to mention is that when you are working jig streamers, these hooks, these hook points, even though the hook a lot of times is going to be inverted, they take a thrashing. And this is where a hook hone is an absolutely essential tool. After just a couple times you come in contact with the bottom, you think it's a fish, you make the hook set, you rip the hook point and basically pull it right against the rock, it's going to dull this hook point. So just make sure every so often, in my case almost every 15-20 minutes, you just take a look at that hook point. And if you can, scratch your fingernail or poke the fly then that's a good thing. But if you can't, we're going to take a hook hone and then just kind of keep this laser sharp. The reason why you do this is, just remember, a lot of times when you're working this jig approach, it's not always a strip set. A lot of times you're using the rod tip, and especially when you're using longer, limper rods, and a lot of times anglers are using these longer European nymphing setups. And these longer European nymphing rods have a lot more flex. And even though you're setting the hook really hard, the rod that has more flex is going to absorb more of the shock. So that means the rod's absorbing more of the shock and you're applying less force to the actual hook set. And when you're using these softer action rods with a jig, it is absolutely essential that you get your point as sharp as possible, because you need as sharp of as a point as you can get, because you're using less force to set that hook or pull that fly into the fish's mouth. So that is an important tip, and that is why, especially on hooks like these Wapsi super jig hooks, I like using them, but for a lot of my hook sets, I find that if I don't sharpen these hooks right out of the box, my hook set percentage just goes completely downhill. So if you're using the Wapsi style super jigs or any of the manufactured jigs, just make sure you take a look at the hook point and usually just sharpen it before fishing. In a lot of cases, I'm just using the traditional nymph jig style hooks, smaller sizes, but these have a very thin needle, super sharp point. And using these, especially on the smaller sizes, I have found that my hooking percentages has just increased tremendously compared to a lot of the like Wapsi super jig style hooks. A little disclosure, the last segment of this video is I'm going down into the Penns Creek area, and I was invited by Craig, who is the owner of a Airbnb, really cool little cabin right on the banks of Pine and Elk Creek, which is a tributary to Penns Creek right inside the town of Coburn. I'm looking at some locations to do some in-person schools, and Craig invited me to come down to take a look at the property. They're not paying me to mention this, but it's just, I went down. They've got a really nice section of property right along the banks of Pine and Elk Creek. You're right in the town of Coburn. You're only a few minutes away from Penns Creek. The house itself is just a quaint, beautiful little home. You can sleep up to 8 people, and it's incredibly well priced. So their operation is called Coburn on the Creek. The owner is Craig and his wife, but I would highly recommend if you're looking to go into the center region area in the coming year to do a little bit of trout fishing, the Coburn on the Creek would definitely be one of the houses I would be looking at if I was taking my family or going out with some friends to fish central Pennsylvania. So again, what I'm going to leave you with is just some fun footage of just jig fishing streamers on my local water. And until next time, I appreciate everyone watching, and take care. Thank you very much.
Swept by current, swallowed by a wave. Take heed, they'll say, no, no, no need to get out, just stay on a lovely holiday. Our love is easy lasting holiday.
And I forgot to mention one thing. Behind me this entire time, you may have heard some grunting or some chewing, is our new little puppy. This is Ray. She's a little Boinkin Spaniel, but I am sure you'll be seeing her photo bomb or video bomb or be part of some videos here in the coming years. But this is Ray. Ray, say hello to everyone, and everyone say hello to Ray. And again, thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has a good start off to their 2021 season. So take care.